achieved.
Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we're breaking down the upcoming UFC Fight Night 29, Maia vs. Shields, which will take place on October 9th. There are 6 main card fights, which I'll be breaking down in this show. There are 5 preliminary predictions, which I'll be breaking down on my website, kamikazeoverdrive.net. I'm still toying with how to condense my predictions. I still like the format I've got, but I'm spending too much time typing up the actual prediction at the end, and I'm toying with the possibility of creating an audio file and sticking it there, and you would just click on it, listen to what I have to say in a minute or so about that fight. We'll see how it plays out, and what I can come up with in the next little while. A couple things I want to talk about. Coming off a 9-4 night at UFC 165, it wasn't a bad night. I kicked myself for switching from Clements to Thompson. Switching from Thompson to Clements. Otherwise, I would have 10-3 and probably, had a little bit more bankroll. But I did fairly well with my number 1 pick being upset. Mine did Michael Prazeres. My number 2 pick being another upset in Mitch Gagnon. And I also had Brendan Schaub stuck in there as well. So not a bad night. The bet packs were all right. They weren't as good as I was hoping they'd be for a 9-4 record. But still, they were winners. So I encourage you to purchase this UFC Fight Night 29 bet pack, which takes place on Wednesday night. Don't forget. So nothing like some midweek MMA betting. All my predictions, as I said, will be available on the website. Josh Harper's picks will be up on the website. And we are now in the Kamikaze Overdrive Prediction Tournament. Down to the best 2 men in the tournament. 32 predictors. We're down to 2. Card representing Canada. Maestro V representing the United States in the tournament finals. These guys have beat out 4 other predictors. 4 rounds of competition to get here. And this round, the championship round, will last 4 events starting now. And it should be a good matchup, so make sure you check their picks out. We've got a lot of fights to get to, so let's get at it right away. We kick things off in the UFC's bantamweight division in our only fight of 2 ranked fighters on the card, as number 5 ranked Raphael Assuncao, 19-4-0, battles alpha male product number 9 ranked TJ Dillashaw, 9-1-0. Both men come into this battle on a 4-fight winning streak. And both guys actually have recent victories over similar opponents. Both guys knock out Issei Tamura in the 2nd round, and they both have submission victories over Von Lee. So some interesting and nice research material, at least, to see how they stack up. A big experience advantage for the Brazilian. He's 24 fights to just Dillashaw's 9, and he's also fighting at home, which is a huge advantage as well. TJ, NCAA Division I wrestler, and as I said, coming out of Alpha Male, so a great grappling camp, taking on Assuncao, who's a BJJ black belt and a very good grappler in his own right. Dillashaw's numbers stack up like this: 4.1 takedowns at 50%, so very strong there, and 100% takedown defense. He averages 3.08 subs per 15 minutes, and overall he's got 3 wins by submission, so very solid on the ground. Assuncao, 1.9 takedowns at 37%, not as good, but still respectable. 82% takedown defense, though, that's significant, and he's 10-1 in fights ended by submission, with his lone loss coming against Uriah Faber. And overall, Assuncao is undefeated at bantamweight and 5-for-5 on takedown defense in this weight class. Assuncao, he changes levels very well. He'll set him up with punches, likes that double leg. On the mat, very smooth transitions. Overall, he's very slick on the ground, and he really likes to look for that quick pass after the takedown before his opponent can get oriented. And defensively, he's got a solid sprawl. For Dillashaw, a wrestler on his back is not always a good thing, so it'll be interesting to see how he could, what he's going to do if that happens. And the grappling actually could cancel each other out here, and we could lead to a striking battle. Now, TJ got tagged by both Von Lee and Hugo Vienna, and that resulted in him going to his wrestling. We'll see if that happens here, and if he can't get his wrestling, what that leads to. Now, Dillashaw, his striking's improving under Dwayne Ludwig. We've seen recent knockouts. He likes to use a lot of fakes and movement to set up his strikes. We saw him land that nice head kick against Tamura that was set up effectively. Also a big head kick against Hugo Vienna, followed by the strikes that put him down. One thing I don't like about Dillashaw is he hangs his lead left arm, which leaves him open for counters, and Vienna was slipping some in. I think he rocked him at one point. What overall Dillashaw has been able to do recently is take advantage of wild strikers and that left openings for both his striking and his grappling, and I think he's done a nice job of that. But Assuncao, he's a counter striker. We saw him wait on Mike Easton, land some big shots, and early backed off the Hulk in that fight. He has no wasted motion, and it leaves limited openings for counters and overall just to be attacked. He manages distance very well, and when he is being aggressive, he likes to back his opponent into the cage and really close the distance off and go to town. He has some heavy leg kicks. He really tags that lead leg, spinning back kick, and some heavy hands, which can be very effective. Now, Dillashaw holds an edge in strikes landed per minute, 4.82 versus 3.02, and both guys limit their opponents to less than 2 strikes landed per minute offensively. Assuncao's striking D is a little bit on his side, 71% to 63%, which is favor, same as I said. Now, both guys also have knockout power, and they've each been stopped once their chins aren't impenetrable. One thing I like with Assuncao, he's going to limit his openings to be hit, and he's going to score with his punches, whether he goes offensive or he uses the counter approach. TJ is taking advantage of wild strikers who have less experience. That won't be the situation here. I think Assuncao gets the better of things, so my prediction is Raphael Assuncao to defeat TJ Dillashaw by decision. Now in the UFC's welterweight division, Rousimar Toquinho Palhares, 23-5-0, makes his promotional debut at 170, taking on 17-5-0 Mike Pierce. Palhares has lost 2 fights in a row, both at middleweight, while Pierce is riding a 4-fight winning streak. Now, Rousimar is his first cut to 170. He's been out of the action since December, so roughly 10 months. It'll be interesting to see how that impacts and if he did the weight cut correctly. He was very strong at 185, lots of muscle, but that's a big question mark about his cardio and how he chose. If he's just going to try and cut water weight or what he's going to do to get down to the weight limit. 5 decision wins overall. But, it's always been an issue. And Mike Pierce, he has excellent cardio, and we'll see how that plays out. Same height, 5'8", same reach, 71 inches. So really not a physical game for Palhares, except for he's not dealing with the bigger men at 185. Pierce, high-level competition overall in his career. Guys like Koscheck, Fitch, Hendricks, all close fights, but he did lose them. He's a former NCAA Division I wrestler, but Palhares, a lucha livre, and BJJ black belt, so very impressive grappler in his own right. Mike, 3.28 takedowns at 43%, 69% takedown defense. All of his wins, all his action on the ground is ground and pound and positional control. Only 1 submission win overall. He was taken down by Aaron Simpson, and Simpson also almost locked up a close rear naked choke. Fitch scored 4 takedowns against him in cost 2, so he certainly can be put on his back if his opponent focuses on that. Now, Rousimar, 3.96 takedowns at 46%, very solid. 0% takedown defense because he wants to go to the ground. He wants his opponents to take him down. 3.78 subs per 15 minutes, so very active. We know what he's capable of on the ground. He did take Dan Henderson down twice, including a big slam, which is an impressive feat. He will pull guard. We saw him do that against Mike Macenzio, and he just rotates around, dives on that leg, and he's a master of leg locks, heel hooks, and he's really effective. But we did see Alan Belcher overcome it with some very good defensive work on those leg locks. Now he couldn't get a takedown or get in close for a takedown on Lombard, and it got hurt early, and that cost him in that fight. And for Pierce, he's a grinder on the mat and in the clinch. Uses that cage like short punches in tight, can generate a lot of power. He used the cage to control Carlos Eduardo Rocha and David Mitchell, 2 grapplers, and I expect something similar here. He was having some issues, though, with Rocha's guard. Seemed a little hesitant once the fight went to the ground, which is respect and also smart. He sat very low in Rocha's guard, stayed out of the reach of his arms, limited those weapons. Now, Rousimar, his chin and mental game are major questions. He freezes up. We saw him get knocked out by Lombard. Belcher took him out, and that Nate Marquardt fight was interesting. He almost got knocked out by Dan Miller as well. And Pierce hits very hard. 8 wins by knockout. He's got some big wins there. He caught Simpson with a short right hand coming forward and showed how much power he can generate. And he's also very tough. He took some big damage in that fight as well. Now, Palhares, his striking's improving. Long layoff could lead to some more improvements there. Pierce's style of attack will draw him into the danger areas and give Rousimar chances to get him to the ground. But we have a mentally strong fighter in Pierce against a very mentally weak fighter in Rousimar Palhares. Lots of unknowns with the Brazilian. Cardio could be a bigger issue at 170. Pierce, I expect him to grind on Rousimar. He needs to be very careful early on, though, but I expect him to grind this fight out, and he's either going to pick up a decision victory or a late TKO. My prediction is Mike Pierce to defeat Rousimar Palhares by TKO. At light heavyweight, Fabio Maldonado, 19-6-0 battles Joey, the Mexicutioner Beltran, 14-8-0 with 1 no contest. In a fight that should be a ton of fun. Maldonado coming off a win that snapped a 3-fight losing streak, while Beltran picked up his win in his second fight at light heavyweight, only to have it overturned due to a no contest. High-volume strikers, both guys are, with good chins and decent KO power. Maldonado comes from a boxing background versus Beltran, who's more of a brawler. Joey, 11 wins by knockout, and he has been knocked out once, which was at the hands of LeVar Johnson, which is nothing to be ashamed of. 4.33 strikes landed per minute. Well, Fabio, 12 wins by KO, 1 knockout, which was a ground-based TKO against Glover Teixeira. He lands 5.7 strikes per minute, which is also a high number. Both guys, on the negative side, high strikes absorbed per minute numbers, both around 4.5, which is, you don't want to be doing that, especially light heavyweight. It's a recipe for disaster. Maldonado, very good body shots. He'll snap 2 or 3 off to the body from in close and then slip in a quick uppercut when his opponent drops his hands. He doesn't really have that one punch knockout power. He'll throw combinations. His damage comes and his knockouts come by accumulation. And he doesn't throw a lot of kicks. He's more of a boxing-based fighter. His striking defense, though, for the most part, is porous for a fighter that relies on technique. And he likes to wave his opponents in and let them hit him, which is just an overall stupid game plan when you're fighting at this level. For Joey, he tries to trade shots for shot with his opponent and break them down, basically going with the I'm going to hit you harder than you are and eventually you'll fade. Improving physical conditioning, which is something to take note of, and that can be a weapon with a high volume and high damage threshold like Joey Beltran has. Now, Maldonado, he can fight a full 3 rounds, but he's going to slow down in those higher paced fights, and we've seen that. What Joey likes to throw is those uppercuts, short punches, body shots, and he'll put his head right in the chest. We saw that against Igor Prokhrayets. He showed an improving grappling game in that fight, using a lot of clinch and controlling Igor. Now, Fabio, he has a questionable grappling defense, poor takedown defense overall. He's been put on his back 11 times in his last 4 fights. He is a BJJ brown belt, but overall he's not very good on the mat. And Joey, what he likes to do is he'll attack in flurries and then change levels for a takedown quickly. He has a minimal takedown game, but he might look for it against Fabio to try and take advantage of it. And overall, it should slow the Brazilians' push forward if Joey can start threatening with some takedowns. And I expect him to at least try and put him on the ground and control him along the cage like Kingsbury and Prokhrayets did both successfully against Fabio. Beltran overall, though, he's 2-6 in decisions, so trouble winning fights when he can't land that KO, and that's a major concern against a guy who's tough to put away. He looked improved against Igor Prokhrayets. For me, Fabio did not look good against Roger Hollett, and he needed Hollett to slow down in that fight before he really got himself into the fight. And I don't think he's the same fighter since that Glover Teixeira beat down, and we'll see if that shows up here. A 10-month layoff for Joey coming off that suspension. But Fabio's style, I think, will get Joey right back into this matchup. I think Beltran will be drawn into a brawl early, and that's what he likes, and that'll get him fired up. Beltran needs to brawl the boxer here. Land the harder shots, mix in some kicks, and if he can use takedowns and clinch to control his opponent, I think that's a big advantage for him. And my prediction is Joey Beltran to defeat Fabio Maldonado by decision. Staying in the light heavyweights, we have another very fun and interesting matchup. It's Thiago Silva, 15-3-0 with 2-0 contest. Battles Matt the Hammer Hamill, 12-4-0. Silva coming off a win over Raphael, which was very impressive. Well, Matt Hamill returned to action from a brief retirement, defeating Roger Hollett via decision at UFC 152. Now, Hamill, he's had a long layoff, and overall he's been very inactive. 13 months off since his last fight, and he's only fought twice since 2011 because he had that mini retirement. So we'll see if that plays a part here. Silva's suspension layoff also hurt him in his has hurt him before, but he's coming off only 4 months since his last fight, so this shouldn't be an issue here. We have a wrestler versus guy who's a Muay Thai striker, but Silva's also a BJJ black belt, so take that into consideration. He has some pretty decent grappling in his own right. Thiago, 12 wins overall by knockout. He's got big power, really hard kicks, good knees, and his combinations are solid, especially when they start backing a guy down and landing. He can be predictable with his striking a little bit, which isn't great, and moving forward a little aggressively. He doesn't make a lot of changes if his attack isn't working. He just keeps doing the same thing, which isn't a good game plan. Chin issues are possibly creeping into his career. He was knocked out by Lyoto Machida, hurt by Gustafsson and Stanislav Nedkov as well. His output's solid, 3.6 strikes landed per minute, and he limits his opponents to 2.27, which is a good trade-off for the most part. For Hamill, his striking is improving. He really likes that spearing lead jab. He has some decent combinations, and he has some power. He's got some knockouts for guys like Tim Boetsch and Mark Munoz. 3.58 strikes landed per minute. Relies on wrestling and ground and pound for some of those numbers, though. 3.53 strikes absorbed per minute, though that's not a good thing. He struggled with the stronger strikers in Alexander Gustafsson and Rampage Jackson, those next level guys. He holds his hands way too low for my liking, stands directly in front of his opponent. He's very vulnerable to counters and just aggressive guys who will come forward and attack. Hamill, 3 takedowns per fight at 36%, so that's probably where his focus should be in this fight. Thiago has lost. He lost the Evans fight because of wrestling. He struggled with Nedkov in the clinch, but he does have 69% takedown defense overall. But he is vulnerable against the right type of wrestler. Hamill is solid ground and pound. He can put a lot of damage on an opponent if he can get a dominant position. We saw that in his last fight. But again, going back to the Gustafsson and Rampage fights, he was 0 for 23 on takedown attempts in those 2 matchups, and that really took some of his confidence away. He wasn't nearly as successful with his striking because he couldn't set up his grappling. Silva, he's had some back issues in the problems, some physical ailments, but he looked better in that last fight, and I expect him to continue showing up with just a better overall appearance. Cardio should favor Hamill if he can get going in the fight, but he slowed down against Hollett a little bit, which I wasn't overly impressed with. That could have come from the early ground and pound, but still, it wasn't the type of fight that should break a fighter. But then again, coming off that big layoff, I guess I'll cut him a little bit of slack. Silva has a major striking edge in both technique and power. He needs to use movement, keep it standing, defend those takedowns, and I've got Thiago Silva to defeat Matt Hamill by knockout. Our co-main event of the night takes place in the UFC's welterweight division as home crowd favorite Erick Silva, 15-3-0 with 1 no contest, battles the stun gun Dong-Hyun Kim, 17-2-1 won with 1 no contest as well. Erick Silva comes into this off a submission win over Jason High, while Dong-Hyun Kim has picked up back-to-back wins, including a one over fellow Brazilian Paulo Thiago. Now, Kim, these are actually, looking at these two guys, they're two very big welterweights. Silva usually is the larger fighter, but in this fight, actually, he's going to be 1 inch shorter and 2 inches of reach disadvantage, and Kim's a very big guy at 170. Silva, black belt in BJJ and Judo, versus Kim, who's a 4th Dan black belt in Judo, so two very solid grapplers with good grappling base. 9 wins by submission for the Brazilian, including wins over Jason High and Charlie Brenneman. He has very good submissions, strong transition game, good back mount, he's heavy on top. He's an overall very effective fighter when he can get the fight to the ground. 1.87 takedowns at 61%, so not the greatest numbers, but still admirable and enough to get the job done more than in most situations. He held his own early with John Fitch on the mat, but he struggled with the grind in that fight, and he faded. And he has done that earlier in his career, too. Winning the fight still, but it was one of those late submissions he pulled out in a fight he was getting dominated on in the mat. 63% takedown defense, but John Fitch did put him on his backside 6 times, so he can be taken down. Kim, also a very strong grappler, but limited submission game. 3.35 takedowns at 50%, so dominant numbers there. 27 takedowns in his last 8 UFC wins, which is very impressive. Heavy top control, decent ground and pound, and he's a strong base, which is very important if he's going to be a grappling-based fighter. He needs to remain active on top to avoid getting stood up, because that's something, if you get that position, maintain it. He's not an exciting fighter, but he's a grinder, and he's good at it. 81% takedown defense, and that's going to be key to keep Silva out of a dominant position on the mat and put this fight where he wants it to be. Erick Silva, he gained that reputation for knockout power early on, stopping a couple of fighters, but he only has 3 knockout wins overall. Silva, lots of different techniques. He likes to throw some high-risk maneuvers, spinning back kicks and elbows. That opens him up. That taxes his cardio, and it opens him up for takedowns. We saw him do it against John Fitch, and it was silly, because Fitch was able to move out of the way and score an easy takedown off the move. Kim, 6 wins by knockout, but we really haven't seen it in the UFC. I think he only has 1 TKO early in his career, and he was knocked out by Carlos Condit after getting swept, and that's his only real defeat, discounting the Maia muscle spasm submission, whatever you want to call it, TKO. For Dong-Hyun Kim, he needs to avoid getting tagged early on here, and he's strong on the ground. Get on top, maintain the position, break Silva down with constant top pressure and ground the pound, much like he did against Paulo Thiago. And my prediction is Dong-Hyun Kim to defeat Erick Silva by decision. Main event prediction time. We head to the welterweight divisions. Number 4 ranked Demian Maia and former middleweight challenger, 18-4-0. Battles former welterweight challenger and former Strikeforce champion Jake Shields, 28-6-1 with 1 no contest. Coming into this fight, Jake Shields picked up a successful return to the welterweight division, defeating Tyrone Woodley, while Demian Maia has picked up a number of consecutive victories, including a win over John Fitch, and is certainly working himself into line for a title shot. Now, what we have here, we have that American Jiu-Jitsu, which Jake Shields likes to talk about, taking on Maia's high-level BJJ. Shields, he's a black belt in BJJ, though, an NCAA Division II wrestler. He likes to combine those together for his own style of jiu-jitsu, as I just talked about. Maia, 4th-degree BJJ black belt, and one of the best guys in MMA on the mat. Demian, 9 wins by submission, 3.35 takedowns at 33%, so pretty good numbers overall. He has 11 takedowns so far in his 3 welterweight fights. That's very impressive, dropping down, focusing on grappling and fighting guys that are more his size. He's very aggressive. He likes to establish body control, will focus on a single leg, and he's also very good at rotating to that back and, just like we saw against Rick Story, forcing his opponent to the mat in a tough position. Shields overall, 10 wins by submission, 3.31 takedowns at 33%, so almost identical numbers to Maia on the mat. He's not a great athlete, and that foot speed, which isn't very strong, which isn't very quick, costs him a little bit in these situations. He does like to close the distance and clinch and drag his opponent to the mat. He'll shoot for a single or double leg and try and power him down, but again, he's not the greatest athlete, not the greatest wrestler overall. He did beat Tyrone Woodley with a clinch-based attack along the cage, but he couldn't take him down, and I think that's noteworthy there. Both guys are good on top and off their back, but overall I just think Demian Maia is a better grappler in both positions. He has no problem pulling guard. I don't know if that's the greatest strategy against Jake Shields, but nonetheless, I think he's just a better grappler, technically speaking. Shields has had trouble in the past with opposition on the mat. Martin Kampmann gave him fits in a grappling-based fight, and we saw Jason Miller way back in Strikeforce put him in some bad positions in that 5-round bout, and a lot of people felt Miller did enough to win that fight. Maia has wins over BJJ black belts overall in his career, guys like George Santiago, Mario Miranda, and Dan Miller, and also over pretty good wrestlers in John Fitch, Rick Story, and Chael Sonnen, so all very impressive grapplers he's been able to put away. Neither guy is a great striker, but again, Maia should be the better man if the grappling does cancel out and we get a sloppy kickboxing match. Shields, again, very stiff, not very fluid. His best weapons are his jab and his low and body kicks. He can be effective with high volume, as we saw in the Yoshihiro Akiyama fight, but again, it's not pretty, and against a decent striker, he's just going to be second best. Maia has been improving his striking, but since his welterweight drop, he's been more grappling focused. We'll see if he's forced to strike, how that plays out. Cardio is an issue for Jake Shields, and it was an issue for Demian Maia at middleweight. We've yet to see it at welterweight. Against the John Fish fight, he went 3 rounds. He faded a little bit, but not like everyone was expecting him to, and he had the fight already in the bag by that point in time. Again, he looked very good against Fish, and that was a very impressive win. Shields, overall, though, in 5-round fights, he's got an edge at 3-1. He's had 3 5-round fights. Maia just the one against Anderson Silva, which was a peculiar matchup and really not a good judge of cart conditioning. Shields will be tested by the pace and aggression of Maia early, and that's something to take into consideration here. Similar size, both guys former middleweight, so I think it's a non-factor. Jake Shields likes to use his size a little bit, but I don't think it'll be an issue here. Grappling could cancel each other out, as I said, and lead to a striking bout, but not likely. I think both guys will look to try and prove their dominance on the mat. I think Maia is too much for Jake Shields early. He'll win that positional battle and eventually slow Jake down. And I've got Demian Maia pulling off the win and really cementing himself as a top contender. Demian Maia defeats Jake Shields. I think he does it by submission. So those are my 6 main card predictions for UFC Fight Night 29. I think this is going to be a great fight. It's Wednesday night. Don't miss it. Just 6 very good fights. 5 preliminary fights as well. My predictions will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. Make sure you check out Josh Harper's predictions on the website as well, and the Kamikaze Overdrive prediction tournament. Those picks will be posted usually a couple hours before the fight starts. Still enough time to get your bets in with that information. And speaking of bets, my bet packs have been doing very well of late. Please consider spending the $10 and getting all that extra information. And that's all for me. We've got some fights coming up. It should be very interesting. I'm looking forward to this card very much. Thank you very much for listening. Kamikaze Overdrive MMA predictions.